Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I did a pretty long hiatus simply because I didn't feel like streaming, to be quite honest. I'm not bored of it, I'm not tired of it. It's just I thought, oh, we covered so much of the rumor buildup for including the products we are talking today. We know a lot of what's coming next year, and honestly, when the new Apple Intelligence Wave hits, once we get iOS 26.2, 3, 4, and once we get, of course, all the smaller accessories, HomePod minis, Apple TVs, right? It's all gonna be worth talking about. However, to be quite honest, I thought, my God, once for once in 2 years, I'm just gonna let the new hardware kind of hit me with at least a little bit of a surprise, and I'm just gonna react about it with you live. And it just happened that it got announced an hour ago. Since then, I've been shaving, making a thumbnail, and just preparing to stream. And I'm actually really happy to be here with you guys. I already see Riley in the chat. I apologize for not doing more regular streams, but thank you for still finding your way back. You're saying you just found out through me? Well, now you're gonna find out a lot more through me. Because, yes, ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about Apple's latest chip generation. Yes, there are products, of course, that ship with this chip, but primarily the story is about the M5 processor. Now, I should add, I'm not sure about one specific thing about the M5. Obviously, the last video I did, we actually reacted to that Russian YouTuber who unboxed the M5 iPad Pro. Seemingly, that was a very legit leak because we're gonna take a look later at the specs here. Now, he did not cover all the details, but I assume that's because those details don't show up in settings as readily available information, because there are some smaller surprises. I would argue some bad pricing decisions on Apple's part. Well, to be honest, we don't know how well certain Apple products sell and whether it's worth more for Apple to just ask for higher profit margins or try to actually sell more. I do have, though, some problems with pricing. Some of the enthusiasm that you guys saw last year when Apple doubled the RAM amount, not just on the M4 generation, but also retrospectively went back to the M3 and even M2 Max, that was great. And unfortunately, we do not have something like that in here. But we will talk about certain gains here that are happening that I think are actually very exciting. We will start with the actual M5 chip because all of that is directly on Apple's newsroom website. Apple unleashes M5, the next big leap in AI performance for Apple Silicon. So, as I said, there's one thing that I'm not so certain about with the M5. There are certain things that I'm now way more certain about. For example, the exact memory speed that it's using. Before, we've speculated whether or not the M5 would be a good opportunity for Apple to launch a 12-core GPU version. That's unfortunately not the case here. This remains a 10 CPU core plus 10 GPU core configuration. However, there's one rumor going around that the M5, unlike the A19 chips, is actually built on TSMC's N3E node, so that's second generation 3 nanometer, rather than the N3P node that the A19 Pro is built on. That would explain why in the league the M5 doesn't actually have a higher clock speed than the M4. It's still 4.4 gigahertz. In comparison, the A19 Pro is up to 4.24 gigahertz, up from 4.04. So roughly a 5% increase in clock speeds, and we are not seeing that on the M5 versus the M4, at least in that original leak. We will, of course, look into benchmarks. I should be noting I'm extremely busy for the next week or two, so it might be until very late October, maybe even early November, that I'll be back, but I'll be back, and then we'll be talking about the exact performance stats, the exact battery life numbers for all the new products, whether they are worth your money depending on the price and the actual value. So I will be back That's why I'm trying to get as much upfront here as possible, not just obviously for this stream and for this week, but also for the next week or two. So Apple unleashes M5, the next big leap in AI performance for Apple Silicon. Now the AI performance enhancement is here coming from the same thing as on the A19 chips. That is primarily an increase in memory bandwidth, but even more importantly, it's built-in neural accelerators with the GPU. That's why Apple promises up to 4 times the peak GPU compute performance. Very important. We are not talking about actual rendering performance. So GPU compute for AI, and that's in comparison to just last gen's M4. So an even larger leap in a way than what Apple promised on the A19 Pro, which was like 3 to 4 times faster depending on the exact benchmark, but still roughly in the same ballpark. Obviously, all of this needs a next-gen GPU. There is second-generation dynamic caching, all the stuff that improved ray tracing. Now Apple isn't specifically talking about all of this here, but this is stuff that we basically expect from a chip that's kind of a larger A19 Pro. With a neural accelerator in each core, a more powerful CPU, a faster neural engine. That's important. That's something that I didn't see Apple specifically advertise on the A19 chips. Now this remains a 16-core neural engine. So the question is, did Apple clock it higher? Is it just benefiting from the faster unified memory bandwidth? Is it working in tandem here with the better GPU? That's going to be interesting to see in actual tests. Apple today announced M5 delivering the next big leap in AI performance and advances. Wait. Am I insane? No, okay, so I was wrong. I'll have to this is the nature of live streams. So, and because I wasn't able to actually pre-read this, yes, so the rumors that I saw on Twitter were actually false. Apple specifically calls this out as third generation 3 nanometer, which would in this case be N3P, which in this case would be the same node as the A19 and A19 Pro, which honestly makes all the sense in the world. There are no big cost savings between choosing N3E versus N3P. Apple already has guaranteed N3P supply because of their A19 orders. Apple is going to be introducing N3P technology to their server chips. Supposedly, they're building M5 Pro and M5 Max out of chiplets, which are going to also be usable in servers, which is very important for the expansion of Apple's private cloud compute AI infrastructure. So yes, I was wrong, but not specifically I was wrong, but when I hedged my bets and saying I'm not sure if this is second generation 3 nanometer and 3E or this is third generation 3 nanometer, well, Apple answers that really quickly. I'm really glad that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm going into detail with you guys, analyzing all of this, reading through it, and guessing from that how good the product might be, because I myself am not MKBHD. I'm not getting to hold the product. Guys, if you're watching this and enjoying this, please hit the like button. Please do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. I love interacting with a lively live chat, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, just chatting, getting suggestions. Obviously, I know a common suggestion would be for me to stream more often so the algorithm doesn't completely forget about my existence. But that's, of course, bound to my job, hobbies, private life. So I apologize for that in advance. And of course, you can support this channel directly via super chats and super stickers whenever you catch me live. However, you can also support this channel directly in the long term. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, and Jonathan, our MarkCheck Pro Max supporters over here. Or you can go to Patreon and supporters over there. Thank you so much. M5 introduces a next-gen 10-core GPU. So you see whether the M4 really focused on CPU performance. Here, the main selling point is the GPU. Specifically, it's the neural accelerators that are in each core. So this is very important because NVIDIA does like tensor cores, which are somewhat separate from the main GPU, but they roughly scale with the amount of like shaders and everything. And AMD basically just tries to make each core about as fast for AI as possible. They just made a video together with Sony PlayStation that they are actually working on something similar to this, which they call a Radiance core. So Apple is kind of in the middle here. It's probably the best approach, especially for the smaller chips, because you kind of don't want to waste even more space on like GPU AI cores, because Apple already has the neural engine, right? That's kind of their tensor cores. But there is a good reason to give the GPU specifically more AI performance. And that is including for features like metal effects upscaling. That's including for features like all the AI stuff. Apple even promises things like faster image playground image generation, or faster Genmoji image generation, right? So clearly those tasks don't run only on the neural engine. And I'm not quite sure why that is, because the neural engine technically is still faster for raw AI compute. So my only kind of speculation is that it's working with the actual GPU to still do the graphics part of it. So there's a little bit of actual rendering involved, but somebody who is an actual engineer, a developer, an AI guru, let me know how wrong I am on this, because I am surprised, even on my iPhone 17 Pro Max, how much faster certain AI features are. Like my most used AI feature is Genmoji, and it's way faster than on my iPhone 15 Pro Max, which that really shouldn't be the case, because the overall AI compute is not that much crazy faster. The neural engine definitely isn't that much crazy faster. It's really just, quote unquote, the GPU that's 3 to 4 times faster. So if somebody knows better than I do, let me know. The GPU also offers enhanced graphics capabilities and third-generation ray tracing. So this is interesting. So Apple thinks that M3 was their first-generation ray tracing, M4 was basically second-generation ray tracing, and this is third-generation ray tracing. So I know some people speculated, well, Apple is kind of to blame for them, given how they brand their GPUs. A lot of people just thought that the M4 GPU, or in this case also the A18 GPU, were kind of the same GPU as on the M3 or on the A17, but basically just clocked higher, maybe higher bandwidth, depending on the exact comparison we're making. But no, seemingly Apple really differentiates between the RT capabilities of each of those generations. It's just interesting that they don't specifically talked about it that much with the M4. So combined, they deliver a graphics performance that is up to 45% faster than the M4. M5 features the world's fastest performance core with so that's Apple's main cores. That's the core that we saw being clocked at 4.4 gigahertz, at least on the iPad Pro. If maybe the actively cooled M4 MacBook Pro might be clocked 100 megahertz higher, 200 megahertz higher, that I couldn't say. Especially now knowing that this is actually third generation 3 nanometer, knowing that this is N3P, I am kind of actually surprised to see that there isn't a higher clock speed, at least in that one leak that we got. Maybe that was also pre-release software. Maybe Apple tuned it up until the very end. I honestly don't know. So M5 features the world's fastest performance core, 10-core CPU, 6 efficiency, and 4 performance cores. So that's the same layout as the M4. They deliver up to 15% faster multi-threaded performance over M4, which of course was already amazing in its class. M5 also features an improved 16-core neural engine. They don't unfortunately make too specific promises, at least not here. A powerful media engine and a nearly 30% increase in unified memory bandwidth. So this comes from the usage of 9600 megatransfers per second. That's the same memory that we see being used on the A19 Pro, just over a larger bus. So where on the A19 Pro, that's 76.5 gigabits per second. On a 64-bit bus, of course, this is just the same 9600 megatransfers per second memory speed, but over double the memory bus, over 128-bit. You can check those calculations. They should be correct. Makes a lot of sense. We've also seen, of course, in the leak that Apple did also increase things like L2 cache that's specifically available, for example, for the E-cores from 4 megabytes to 6 megabytes. So a lot of changes that kind of span the range of A-series chips and now M-series chips. M5 brings its industry-leading power-efficient performance to the 14-inch MacBook Pro, the iPad Pro, and Apple Vision Pro. So that's our first ever Apple Vision Pro update. I will talk about why this is a bigger update than some people think, but why I also think that I believe Apple kind of messed up a little bit and that they really needed to find a way to bring pricing down. I assume that that's something they're just keeping in their arsenal, maybe for a year later, maybe for a true next-gen device with an actual new design that saves on certain material costs. But yes, the Apple Vision Pro, if you're interested, I'm gonna spoil it right away, still starts at $3,500, still for a 256 gigabyte base configuration. The M5 allows each of those devices to excel in their own way. All are available for pre-order today. M5 ushers in the next big leap in AI performance for Apple Silicon, said Johnny Sarugi, Apple's Senior Vice President of Hardware Tech. With the introduction of neural accelerators on the GPU, M5 delivers a huge boost to AI workloads, combined with a big increase in graphics performance, the world's fastest CPU core, a faster neural engine, and even higher unified memory bandwidth. M5 brings far more performance and capabilities to MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, and Apple Vision Pro. Just for some context, for example, that 153 gigabytes per second, that is now very competitive actually with the M3 Pro chip. So that one was built on a 192-bit bus, but it used slower memory. So yeah, over just a year and a half, 2 years, the base chips are more competitive now with the Pro chips, and for certain tasks like AI acceleration, I wouldn't be surprised if that applies to ray tracing too. I'm pretty sure that the M5 is very competitive with the M3 Pro. So, next-gen GPU architecture, 4 times peak GPU compute for AI versus M4, 6 times GPU compute increase over M1. So that's interesting. According to Apple, between M1 and M4, the raw improvement of AI compute was only 50%. And don't forget, between M1 and M4, we obviously jumped from 5 nanometer to 3 nanometer. We went from 8 GPU cores to 10 GPU cores. We got faster memory. So there's plenty here that's a true generational leap. And with M5, the new 14-inch MacBook Pro and iPad Pro benefit from the dramatically accelerated processing for AI-driven workflows, such as running diffusion models in apps like DrawThings or running large language models locally using platforms like WebAI. So this is important. I already brought up, of course, certain Apple AI tools, Apple intelligence tools. That, of course, is like from Apple Cleanup to writing tools, to stuff that I mentioned like Genmoji and Image Playground. There is obviously stuff that runs on your device. That's of course not even to ignore the fact that like a part of the imaging pipeline for your selfie camera and everything benefits from AI, all that stuff. But of course, especially on the MacBook, where you have access to whatever software you want to run from the web, and even on the iPad, they are basically wrappers for certain LLMs, including ones you run on device, including Apple's own diffusion models, by the way. So whenever I hear people say, oh, what AI acceleration? Apple doesn't have AI. Apple is the only one actually pushing this on-device AI. Like, I know Samsung has some features. I know Google has, obviously. I mean, that's why Google kind of is doing what they're doing with the Tensor chips. But the amount of, like, especially on the Mac, with the push for unified memory and high memory configurations, like the M4 Max goes up to 128 gigabytes, the M3 Ultra goes up to 512 gigabytes. The extreme efficiency that comes from running it all on an SoC, on a 3 nanometer on an SoC that has some of the world's bestest P and E cores. I said bestest, which is insane. I swear to you, my English is better than this. Okay, good. Sorry, I am a little bit paranoid about my microphone. It should be working fine. As always, let me know what the audio and video quality is for you like. But yeah, if you've checked out my last 2 streams, my microphone was really going crazy because its mute button kept activating itself in and out. And whenever you just see my regular wallpaper, that's probably that I have OBS open and just OBS doesn't show up on your screens. So that's the M5 iPad Pro, of course, in all glory. It's visually identical to the M4 iPad Pro. You can also see, just from the first glimpse, and we are going to check out tech specs later on, there's no second camera here. So the camera obviously migrated from portrait side to landscape. That's to make it better as like a Teams device and stuff like that. But Mark Gurman in the past had predicted that this might go here. And I don't mean that it's going back from here to here, but that we might actually see dual front cameras. And while I have made the point that I don't think it would be the worst idea, because the iPad Pro is already plenty expensive, and I don't think a second camera would either take up too much internal space or be too expensive. However, with the introduction of the new 24 megapixel or 18 megapixel, depending on how you see it, center stage camera on the iPhone that uses a larger sensor, better optics, a square sensor, I think that would be a way, way better choice for the iPad Pro. Now, I'm wondering if that optical solution for a sensor that large would be potentially limited by like the 5.1 millimeter thickness of the iPad Pro. So again, if somebody is an engineer, now I'm asking for hardware engineers. Let me know if you think that maybe that sensor couldn't fit into the current iPad Pro. Not the sensor itself, obviously, but with the appropriate optical system on top. The next-gen GPU and enhanced shader cores, so important. It's not just next-gen GPU for AI, it's also shaders. So your traditional or both raster and now ray tracing performance is going up. There is 30% faster performance compared to M4 and 2.5 times faster than M1. So I mentioned how this will be really comparable to the M3 Pro, especially the bint version in many situations. With the M1, it utterly destroys the base M1, but it will also destroy the M1 Pro, right? Because not only does it have now over double the performance of M1, so it has more performance than the M1 Pro, but consider all the architectural improvements on top, especially for things like ray tracing, AI compute, which again does benefit features like Apple's Metal FX pipeline. So yeah, this will be way better for gaming than basically anything in the M1 generation, except for maybe what I have, which is the highest end M1 Max. But that's the one with like 400 gigabyte per second memory and stuff like it's really not comparable in terms of power consumption, and is still in feature sets. I'm pretty sure that this will be faster in things like ray tracing than my obviously non-hardware accelerated GPU on the M1 Max. Third generation ray tracing performance, so up to 45% graphics uplift specifically in ray tracing. So these are actually much more concrete numbers than what Apple gave us with the A19 Pro, where they kind of tried to summarize those into like one number. Granted, that's probably from the fact that there isn't that much iOS software that really benefits from ray tracing. And now that they're advertising this on a Mac, like, I mean, there isn't even that much ray tracing software on iPad, though Blender will be a thing on iPad. But yeah, 45% increase in ray tracing, that will be very interesting to check in stuff like Blender and other rendering apps. Combined with re-architected second generation dynamic caching, the GPU provides, so that's important, because some people say, well, Apple just says it's new even though it's not new. See how they call dynamic caching here second generation? So M4 A18 Pro did not get a new generation of dynamic caching. The first generation dynamic caching came with the A17 Pro and the M3 chips. These chips also introduced hardware accelerated ray tracing. And see what Apple calls ray tracing here? Third gen ray tracing. So they see the RT generation is distinct from A17, A18, A19, M3, M4, M5, while here, they, with the dynamic caching architecture, they only see this as distinct from A17 and A18, and now we get A19, M3, M4, and now distinct to M5. So definitely Apple is much more honest in this regard than people complain. And part of that, I would argue, comes from the fact that they are very proud of what they're achieving with Apple Silicon. Because you saw the 8 Elite Gen 5 this year, you saw the Dimensity 9500, you saw how much faster this chips had to clock to kind of get to like 80 to 90% of the single core performance of the A19 Pro. They obviously use more cores to give you a tiny bit more multi-threading performance, but at the cost of like 50, 60%, in some cases double the power consumption, dramatically, meaning that like their efficiency just completely goes down the drain, even though they have like 2 extra E-cores. So Apple still is absolutely king with Apple Silicon. That does not mean that Apple gets to demand whatever price they want. I do have criticism specifically this time around for the pricing of the iPad Pro and the Apple Vision Pro. I think the Mac is mostly fine, especially since I think that Apple's advantages are so unique these days. Even though we have gotten like big SoCs from AMD, for example, like those SoCs are still like 4 nanometer, while Apple is on third generation 3 nanometer. They use RDNA 3.5, which is worse in several ways than the GPU architecture of the M3 generation in terms of hardware accelerated ray tracing, in terms of AI performance. And again, AI performance is not just running a chatbot. In fact, the AI performance of your device is probably the least relevant thing when it comes to running a full-featured chatbot. That chatbot needs so much more memory, needs so much more access to data from the cloud, that it's just better off running from the cloud. Now, there will be a difference when it comes to like a device-specific AI, like if Apple makes Siri really run well for on-device things, and I don't mean like just making Siri run on device, but making Siri control things that are on device. Your settings, your apps, understanding whatever on your screen without tapping into the cloud, that can benefit. But that's pretty much what nobody really is doing, because the cloud is still so much faster. By the way, I apologize. I've been reading a lot recently. That's why my eyes might be tiring out a little bit faster here than usual. And guys, please, if you haven't yet done so, but you're enjoying what you're seeing, please hit the like button. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Please consider leaving a comment. I love interacting with a lively comment section. Let's just have more people come in. I'm just actually testing out the stream on my iPad, and I have a secondary account where I can see ads. That way I make sure that I don't have ads on during the live stream. And just I don't usually like my videos, like myself. That the algorithm doesn't care about if I like it myself. But I just see that the like button on the new YouTube design is completely broken on iPad. The YouTube app, it has gotten so much worse over the last couple of years. It's really not even funny. So 3D applications benefit, of course, faster rendering times for graphics project. With M5, Apple Vision Pro renders 10% more pixels with the micro OLED display. This is interesting because this suggests that there is actually a newer screen on the Apple Vision Pro. I hope with it also comes a larger field of view, because that was like my biggest complaint with the first generation Apple Vision Pro. I thought the screen was amazing. I thought performance was still plentiful with the M2, but specifically, I just wanted to see more, right? Now, a larger screen helps with that, but they would also need to adjust the optical system for that as well a little bit. So I hope they do that too. It also increases refresh rate to up to 120 Hertz. Previously, it was 90 Hertz. So that's crisper detail. You literally get more resolution, both spatial resolution and temporal resolution. That's really good. That's also good because we are seeing some incoming VR headsets that have higher pixel density. Now, 10% more pixels could mean just a 10% larger screen with the same pixel density. It technically could mean a slightly smaller screen with a 6-7% larger pixel density. It could mean the same size screen with like largely 4% higher pixel density. So that will be interesting. What exactly is the spec here? I have not yet gotten the chance to check the exact tech specs of the Apple Vision Pro. This is Cyberpunk being advertised. Unfortunately, we do not have new games being mentioned. Now, they do specifically call out, of course, new features and better frameworks, Core ML, Metal Performance Shaders, Metal 4. So we are, for example, still waiting for the Metal 4 update for Cyberpunk 2077. Let's hope that actually kind of comes in a similar timeline with the new MacBook Pro. A faster neural engine to power intelligence features. The faster 16-core neural engine delivers powerful AI performance with incredible energy efficiency, complementing the neural accelerators in the CPU and GPU to make M5 fully optimized for AI workloads. So that's also a big misunderstanding. AI accelerators on Apple's CPU have been a thing long before the support for scalable matrix extensions, the thing that gave them such a big boost in Geekbench 6 running on the A18 chips, on the M4 chips. A lot of people try to cry about it. They try to say that's cheating. Now, Qualcomm is using, I believe, 4 SME accelerators on their 8 Elite Gen 5. I know the Dimensity 9500 went a little bit insane in integrating those. Very much for benchmarks, because don't forget, these companies do not have Apple's level control of hardware, software, services, firmware, development tools. Apple can actually make sure that each different AI accelerator is utilized. Not only maybe some task will like the CPU AI accelerator more, maybe some task will like the neural engine more, but also simultaneously through frameworks like Core ML, which allow you to have full access of the combined AI brand of the entire SoC. For example, AI-powered features on Apple Vision Pro, like the ability to transform 2D photos into spatial scenes in the Photos app, that's a feature that's available across iOS and macOS too, or generating a persona, now we are talking specific Apple Vision Pro feature, operate with greater speed and efficiency. So it's interesting that they're mentioning specifically that these tasks are on the neural engine, but then they're also bringing up still the neural accelerators in the CPU and the GPU. And they do not give us exact numbers for improvements of the neural engine. AI-powered features run up to 50% faster for system experiences like capturing a persona on Apple Vision Pro thanks to the faster neural engine. This to me would actually kind of make sense because obviously the CPU is just a little bit faster in general, 15% faster. The GPU gives you 4 times more AI compute. The GPU was always like 6-7 times slower than the neural engine, so it's still like roughly probably like half as fast only as the neural engine. Again, I am more familiar with the ratios on the A series chips than the M series chips, so I mean we can kind of check that, right? Geekbench AI not M5, M4. MacBook Pro M4. So this is running on, well, this is an outdated version of Geekbench AI. Can I just look for the specific product, look for Geekbench AI, Core ML GPU, 16,000, 18,000, 17,000, so roughly 17,000 average. You see there is not a specific optimization based on whether a task is like FP32, FP16, FP8. And on the neural engine, you see we have a very low precision, single precision, because that is absolutely worthless, basically, for this. But it's roughly 2 times faster for half precision, and it's actually 3 times faster for quantized scores. So if we now kind of assume that the GPU here now will deliver 4 times faster results, now it would actually be faster than the neural engine. And given the change in ratio, that would explain why the overall chip output might be 50% faster. Don't forget that chip output will also be limited by some other factors like the amount of cache and the memory bandwidth. And the memory bandwidth, for example, has gone up 30%. So maybe even if the chip overall might have more than 50% extra AI compute, don't forget the chip is also simply limited by other factors. Though I don't actually think that it should be more than 50% faster, because that's one part of the pipeline. And again, they do not give specific AI numbers for the neural engine. Maybe this is 10% faster. If the CPU is also 10% faster, that roughly checks out to a combined 50% increase. Sorry, I have so many tabs open and my eyes just cannot focus for some reason today. The Neural Engine M5 also enhances performance for Apple Intelligence. On-device AI tools like Image Playground get faster. And they're enhanced by Neural Engine, Unified Memory, blah, blah, blah. So Apple is bringing up a lot of the same stuff. Enhanced memory to do even more. So 153 gigabits per second. That's 30% more than M4. So that's 7,500 megatransfers per second. Wait. Yeah. 7,500 up to 9,600. Yep, that makes sense. And over 2 times faster than M1. That also makes sense. That one was actually 4233 or something like that. So, or 4266, I think. So that's actually slower than that. So it's combined like what, 2.2, 2.4 times faster. The unified memory architecture enables the entire chips to access a larger single pool of memory. It should be noted that this is still limited to 32 gigabytes of memory, and similar to M4, it starts with 16 gigabytes. Unfortunately, the upgrade pricing to 32 gigabytes is still, in my opinion, an unacceptable $400. So you have to pay $200 more to get to 24 gigabytes, and then $200 more to 32 gigabytes. Now I understand this is faster memory. I understand that memory and storage are actually getting more expensive because of the extreme usage they're seeing in AI tasks. But don't forget, this is the year where Apple gave the A17 Pro and iPhone Air 50% more memory and faster memory at the same price, while simultaneously giving it a new design, larger battery, faster charging, better cooling, new antennas, new Wi-Fi chip, new 5G chip, right? So, in my opinion, Apple clearly could have simplified the upgrade pricing, at least made this a $300 upgrade charge, and just rationalized away the 24 GB model, or just be more generous, double the value of memory upgrades, go from 16 directly to 32 for $200, and I think you will have a really good product on your hand for good money, and you will have less confusion with the M Pro and M Max chips. M5 also helps users to seamlessly run demanding creative suites like Adobe Photoshop and Final Cut Pro simultaneously. Again, this depends a little bit, of course, on what exact project you're running. Apple Silicon and the environment. Apple 2030 is the company's ambitious plan to be carbon neutral across its entire footprint by the end of this decade by reducing product emissions from their three biggest sources: materials, electricity, and transportation. The power-efficient performance of M5 helps the new 14-inch MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, and Apple Vision Pro meet Apple's highest standards for energy efficiency and reduces the total amount of energy consumed over the product's lifetime. So it's interesting, they are saying it's using less energy, which we know from the A19 Pro. While it is a more efficient chip than the A18 Pro, it's at its peak, it's not really using less energy. So that's an interesting contradiction that I think. But they probably estimate that in regular usage, because of the better e-cores and stuff like that, we are just gonna see like less power usage for everyday tasks like web browsing, office work, things like that. So that's probably still somewhat true, at least. But that's about it for the main chip. I mean, we've talked about it for like over 35 minutes. Let's talk about the actual products running it. And let's start with the M5 MacBook Pro, the 14-inch version. So if you are curious, what does that mean for the M4 Pro and M4 Max MacBook Pros? They're still in the lineup. They're still at the same price. They're still exist with the same RAM and storage configurations. So this is just a slot in a replacement for the M4 MacBook Pro, specifically for the M4 14-inch MacBook Pro. The screen is the same. There are even some small disappointments here, I would argue, like the fact that its Wi-Fi and Bluetooth technology is not improved. So in fact, for all of this, let me actually find you the MacBook Pro here. So that's the new 14-inch version, still the same $1,600 starting price. You see Apple starts to talk about the M5. And then basically that's where most of the selling points kind of end. Now they do advertise 24 hours of battery life, which is supposedly the biggest battery life ever on a MacBook, which isn't too surprising, especially with the better efficiency cores and 6 of them. There's good reason to believe that, similar to how the A19 Pro is actually more efficient than the A19, that the M5 is actually just more efficient than any Apple Silicon chip ever. So yeah, that makes sense that you'll get a tiny bit more battery life from the same size battery, given that you still have roughly the same screen, the same networking technologies, the same UI. And of course, it's all running macOS Tahoe. That's probably a part of why these devices are coming out, just to make them coincide, of course, with the launch of iOS 26, iPadOS 26, macOS 26, visionOS 26, all the 26s. The sizes are still 14 and 16 inch. The colors are actually surprising. Some people speculated we might see a blue version based on Apple's tease yesterday. No, it's still silver and space black. The screen is still LCD in that regard, but it is, of course, a mini LED liquid retina XDR display. That's 1000 nits of SDR brightness, 1600 nits of HDR brightness, and a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. Most likely, it's the slightly faster screen as well from the M4 generation that uses quantum dot technology. This is a little bit disappointing. 3 Thunderbolt 4 or 5 ports. Obviously, the 5 is for the Pro and Max chips, unfortunately. We keep MagSafe, SDXC, HDMI, the ability, of course, to connect to multiple monitors, which was, to a surprising thing, it was new with the M4. It keeps the 12 megapixel center stage camera. So that's also partially the point. While I do not recommend anybody update to this from M4, definitely, most people shouldn't update to this from M3. But if you're coming from M1 or M2, you're getting a lot of just stacked up improvements on top of each other. Mics and speakers, obviously, I don't know if they're specifically better than the previous generation, but we know Apple has absolutely best-in-class speakers, at least relative to the size of the products. They're saying they're made with 100% recycled aluminum, so that's just another point in like the environmental story that we also just read in the beginning. M5 chip, 6% faster AI performance than M1. So given that this is kind of the only major change on this product, you see that it's not really like worth even going through, because all of these are like gonna be the same talking points. 3 chips, second to none, M5, M4 Pro, M4 Max. I think if you are an AI developer, you are kind of very much now probably waiting for M5 Max, getting like 4 times more GPU per AI compute from a device that already where the GPU greatly exceeded the performance of the neural engine. I think that's honestly going to be a little bit insane. So M4 Pro delivers even more power. Yeah, okay, so these are just other devices that, of course, we've talked about last year. M4 Pro, M4 Max, built for AI, Apple Intelligence, great privacy and security, all-day battery life, so up to 24 hours battery life, which because Apple is correct. Still, many people are updating from Intel devices. This, in fact, brings 14 hours more than an Intel-based MacBook Pro, which, of course, are now 6 years older or more, which are, of course, based on older CPUs, which are, of course, based on older nodes. So that's not surprising. Then Apple talks about the synergy of iPhone and Mac, macOS Tahoe. So you see, there's nothing too surprising about this. This is just the M4 MacBook Pro, but now with the M5 chip inside. Same pricing here, $1,600 for 16 gigabytes of unified memory and 512 gigabytes. You can upgrade for $200 either to 1 terabytes of storage or to 24 gigabytes of unified memory. Basically the same thing as before. You see, of course, that there's still more oomph behind the Pro and Max chips, but specifically if you're thinking about AI, I would just argue it just makes sense to wait. They also brought up a powerful media engine, but they do not specifically talk about changes to the media engine, so that's interesting. So there is no, for example, like AV1 encode, which some people had hoped would come to the A19 Pro but didn't, and similar to this, it's also not coming to the M5. Same screen on all of them. Same size battery, but of course that brings you up to 24 hours on the M5 version, up to 22 hours on M4 Pro, and up to 18 hours with the M4 Max. One thing that I had kind of hoped, I'm not sure if it's in any way confirmed or denied, would be to get faster storage on the base M series. So this was limited to basically PCIe 3x4, while this is basically PCIe 4x4. So this this is up to 3.5 gigabits per second. This is up to 7 gigabits per second. Unfortunately, Apple isn't not talking about it. If they are, I must have missed it. They're also not improving the actual I/O. They're keeping it to Thunderbolt 4. If you want Thunderbolt 5, you would have to use the M4 Pro or M4 Max version. So in that regard, please Apple, quickly release M5 Pro and M5 Max. And the biggest disappointment to me here, and again, I know that Apple's Wi-Fi 7 modem doesn't even really give you a big boost in speed over the Wi-Fi 6E modem that they have. But given that they built in the N1 modem into the iPad Pro that just came out, and also that enabled it to have Bluetooth 6, it's just a little bit disappointing to see now a like 3-4-year-old Wi-Fi standard from Apple, right? Like that standard is even older than that, but Apple has been using it already for a couple of years. And given that even the iPhone 16 series was entirely Wi-Fi 7 to still be limited to Wi-Fi 6E, again, even if it's probably just a limitation in name only, is disappointing. And then the rest is what I've already mentioned: cameras, audio systems, very similar to previous generations. We'll have to see if there are any exact details here. Pricing is not crazy. Already brought up the $1,600 starting price. With it, of course, M4 Pro, M4 Max still maintain the same pricing. That includes the same pricing per gigabyte of storage and per gigabyte of extra RAM. So you are not, unfortunately, getting in any way like a big value change, similar to what you got with the M4 last year, where you doubled the base amount of RAM. You're not getting 50% or double the storage. You're supposedly not getting faster storage. So that and the non-improved networking are kind of the biggest downsides of this device. However, again, this is to go back to the Rene Ritchie metaphor about bakeries and technology. I'm not buying fresh bread every single day, but whenever I go into a bakery, I want that bakery to have fresh bread, right? And this is similar to this, right? You might not have wanted the M3 MacBook, and with the M4, you might have been kind of on the fence. But now the M5 is here, and while it hasn't improved absolutely everything, right? If you spontaneously decide to buy, especially an MSRP MacBook right from Apple's website, now you literally get like 15% more CPU performance, 30 to 45% more GPU performance, 4 times the AI acceleration from the GPU. So you're getting faster memory. So just as a slot-in replacement over M4, it's good to have it, but it's definitely not mind-boggling. No, Riley, the Pro and Max chips are not out, and honestly, I think that the rumors that they're coming out early next year are correct. Whether or not Apple is doing this for marketing reasons, I actually doubt that. My speculation is that Apple is doing this because the M5 Pro and M5 Max chips are taking longer to develop. Supposedly, they are now chiplet-based rather than just being one humongous SoC. The problem with humongous SoCs is that the denser the node gets, the smaller the final SoC actually gets. So by the time Apple moves to 2 nanometer and A16 and A14 and stuff like that, right? Apple's ability to actually make 600 square millimeter, 700 square millimeter SoCs will be pretty much non-existent. So instead, they will base this probably on separate CPU and GPU dies. Maybe they will have like a memory controller on an older node, right, to make that one cheaper, because that technology doesn't really scale that well with new nodes. Maybe that would be a way to give us more performance, but still keep a lot of the advantages of the SoC design, of the unified memory design, and still give us actually a larger and larger chip. Just that that chip is not one die anymore. It's 2, 3, maybe even 4 dies, who knows. Especially especially when we are talking about the max configurations at that point. But that's about it for the M5 MacBook Pro. Let's talk about the iPad Pro, because the iPad Pro here has a few more surprises up its sleeve than the MacBook Pro, but I would also argue that Apple is missing a chance to up its value enough to actually make it much more relevant, especially with iPadOS 26 out. I think that would have been a great opportunity to give the iPad more value, and I think there is one specific upgrade that Apple charges for here that is some of the worst value that I have seen from Apple in a while, and I'm not afraid to call them out on that. But let's talk about it. iPad Pro, next gen Apple Silicon, and of course built on iPadOS 26. This is just the M4 iPad Pro in terms of visual design. Once again, no dual front selfie camera. Also, from the tech specs that I've already read, it's not using the center stage 24/18 megapixel camera, but there are some other goodies here as well. So of course, Apple brings up the same improvements here over M1, over M4. It's interesting that the scaling seems to be slightly different. So I'm now really wondering if maybe the CPU and especially the GPU clock speeds are a little bit different on the M5 iPad Pro than they are on the MacBook Pro. Maybe to preserve battery life and to preserve a great experience when it comes to cooling and heat generation, maybe this is clocked like 5%, 10% lower than the one on the MacBook Pro that obviously has active cooling. So 3.5 times the AI performance in iPad Pro with M4, while on the MacBook Pro it's advertised as 4 times faster, and 5.6 times faster than the iPad Pro with M1. Again, this is where the MacBook Pro advertised as 6 times improvements. However, and now we're talking more Apple Silicon, just actually new Apple Silicon, because we've obviously talked about the M1 quite a lot, the M5 quite a lot today. These two chips, we have already known them, but this is the first time we're seeing them outside the iPhones. N1, the new Apple-designed wireless networking chip, enables the latest generation of wireless technology with support for Wi-Fi 7 and iPad Pro. Note how Apple does not advertise higher download speeds here with this. They are just making it Wi-Fi 7 ready, also Bluetooth 6 ready. It's also most likely more efficient than before, and of course it has thread networking support by default. So it is an improvement, but that's why I'm saying the difference between Apple 6e and Wi-Fi 7 implementation is currently not that huge. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes us until an N1X or an N2 to get a proper doubling of speed by Apple using the 320 megahertz band for Wi-Fi 7. They're currently limiting it to 160 megahertz, so literally half the speed. However, I should also note that for most people, given how you use your home networks, given the actual limits of speed that your carrier might provide, that your router is able to handle, you most likely will never feel the difference for the next 10 to 20 years between 160 megahertz Wi-Fi 7 network to 320. If you think you can, then you know you are in the market for a device with proper Wi-Fi 7, right? That's then not for me to tell you. You're not the average Joe at that point. Now, when it comes to 5G, here Apple absolutely advertises an actual improvement in download speeds, and that is the C1X modem. This is also the first time an iPad is getting an Apple in-house modem. So this is actually a really fast rollout. So the C1 launched on the iPhone 16e. C1X just launched on the iPhone Air. The rest of the iPhone 17 lineup is still built on Qualcomm's latest X80 modem. But apparently Apple thought the C1X is also good enough for the iPad. 50% faster cellular data performance than its predecessor, with even greater efficiency, allowing users to do more on the go. I wonder if they upped the battery promises, because M5 is more efficient than M4. C1X most definitely is more efficient than the previous Qualcomm modem that they've used. Like, will they finally give us more than 9 hours of 5G usage? Which again is not the exact number, right? It obviously depends on like your screen brightness and everything, but I'm just a little bit surprised because this would have been a decent opportunity to like advertise the iPad as like a 12-hour of battery life device. It's still available in Space Black and Silver, still in 11 and 13-inch sizes, and it's powered by iPadOS 26. So again, nothing surprising here. You see the design that you saw before. This is the 5G modem that we see here. M5, the next big leap in AI. Apple brings up here features again like image playground, but also other things like draw things and AI video masking in apps like DaVinci Resolve. And of course, with certain apps, you can even run Apple's own diffusion model live on device. Next level performance, 1.5 times faster 3D rendering with ray tracing than the previous generation iPad Pro, and up to a whopping 6.7 times faster rendering performance than the iPad Pro with M1, which obviously did not have hardware accelerated ray tracing. So that's interesting. There's probably a benefit here that the Mac does not see, and that's the fact that the M4, the DM5 iPad Pro by default comes with 12 gigs of RAM instead of 8. So that might be a benefit here. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if those tests were just run on devices that have 16 gigs of RAM. We can actually check reference 1 and 2. Reference 1 and 2. Results are compared to iPad Pro M4 units with 10 core and 16 gigs of RAM. Results are compared to iPad Pro, that's exactly my model, with 8 core CPU and 16 gigabytes of unified memory. Okay, so they're not cheating. They're not using improved memory performance here. Oh, they're actually giving some pretty concrete numbers. That's actually pretty dope. So 6.7 times faster rendering in Octane X versus M1, 50% faster than M4, 6 times faster video transcode performance in Final Cut Pro for iPad when compared to M1, 1.2 times faster than iPad Pro with M4, 4 times faster image generation, 2 times faster than iPad Pro with M4. So some very different scaling, but then again, don't forget that every task will respond slightly differently. Up to 3.7 times faster AI video upscaling performance in DaVinci Resolve for iPad when compared with the iPad Pro with M1, 2.3 times faster than iPad Pro with M4. That's actually interesting because we do kind of see like a 50% difference here almost. So we see some indicators that the scaling is pretty consistent, but it's just not exactly the same because every single task might run into its own kind of limitation, whether it's bandwidth, even to a degree storage speed. So yeah, just makes sense as it is. Faster memory bandwidth, 12 gigs of unified memory, 50% more than before. This I find disappointing. I think Apple should have really just universally doubled it to 16 gigabytes. I know iPadOS uses less memory, it's less bloated than macOS, but I don't think that Apple is saving enough money here. Should just go unified 16 gigabytes. Just order the same memory sticks between iPad and Mac and just do it, right? So you get 12 gigabytes on 256 and 512 gigabytes devices. And then for the devices with 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes, you get 16 gigabytes. So if you had hoped that we would see like a 50% increase on that configuration up to 24 gigabytes, which at that point would actually be a great, well, by Apple standards, a great upgrade value for $400. Unfortunately, no, that's just not happening. Additionally, iPad Pro supports fast charge, enabling up to a 50% charge in around 30 minutes with an optional high wattage USB-C power adapter like Apple's new 40-watt dynamic power adapter with 60 watts max. So they're probably pretty confident in the cooling here. Again, this is not the craziest charging speed imaginable, but hey, it just helps, right? Now, let's actually talk about Apple's exact promises for the C1X and the N1. And I kind of think it says a lot that the C1X, for one, gets a larger portion, but also that the C1X just gets actual numbers. Cellular models of iPad Pro feature C1X, a cellular modem designed by Apple that brings users up to 50% faster cellular data performance, and for active cellular users, up to 30% less power usage than iPad Pro with M4. So if you have an iPad Pro that's older than the M4 with an older modem, that difference might be huge. And I actually would like to compare iPads. I would actually really like to see. This is iPad Pro M5. Here's iPad Pro. What? Do they not? Oh, yeah, okay. iPad Pro M4. Let's look at the iPad Pro M1 roughly. Which one was that? That's the M2. Let's look at this one. I actually want to see, but I'm not sure if Apple, so obviously we now jumped several Wi-Fi technologies from Wi-Fi 6 to Wi-Fi 6E to Wi-Fi 7. Apple unfortunately does not bring up the exact details here. Storage just hasn't gone up enough in my opinion. This should be standard now. It's okay, this was 128, this is 256. This should now be 512. And I think that would really, I think 512 gigabytes plus 16 gigs of RAM would easily justify the starting price. And I think it would make a lot more people happy to keep buying Apple Pencil Pro, the Apple Magic Keyboard, just knowing that, oh yeah, right, like these are actually like cool products. And I actually have some money to spare because I didn't completely overpay for storage and memory. But yeah, like okay, then we have the tandem OLED screen. Same advantages here. Same binning, by the way, 9-core CPU, but full GPU cores, same as we had on the M4 generation. Media engine capabilities. Again, we do not have exact speeds, and obviously versus the M1 version, we have a ton more stuff, like obviously support for 8K, H.264, and HEVC. This is 4K, ProRes RAW, of course, so plenty of stuff that was added on top, and then of course even AV1 decode, not encode. Seemingly Apple does not think that it either needs that or they don't want to waste die size on that. Power and battery. So this is the first device they actually advertise as fast charge. Even though I would argue 50% charge in 30 minutes, would that be possible here? Probably close, maybe more like 35, 40 minutes. So I will be interested to see in the exact battery test here. Even more interesting, Apple keeps advertising the same battery life as they have since the original iPad Pro. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, since the, not even iPad Pro, since the original iPad, the 2010 15-year-old iPad with the A4 processor came with the same promise of 10 hours of surfing the web on Wi-Fi and 9 hours of surfing on cellular data. What's interesting here specifically is that, of course, this device also promises 30% more efficiency from the cellular networking versus this one, yet it's not reflected by like even 15 minutes or even like half an hour of promised battery life. That's a little bit insane. Smart HDR4, so obviously the older camera and sensor technology is limiting the capabilities here. I wouldn't be surprised if the actual image signal processor was very much capable of Smart HDR5. The front camera, yep, 12 megapixels, f2.0, center stage landscape. No mention of a portrait camera. No mention of a switch to the 24 megapixels. Also, this camera is still Smart HDR4, which that one is really the biggest disappointment because, I mean, the back camera, you're probably just going to use it for stuff like document scanning. But the front camera, my God, that could really use an uplift. Yeah, okay, so Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, learn more. Okay, so they do not bring up full details here, unfortunately. It's Thunderbolt and USB 4, so iPads still don't have like dual monitor output. Otherwise, this would be like specifically Thunderbolt 4 labeled. Apple could label this Thunderbolt 3, but they probably don't want to because that sounds bad. So they just use the 4 of the USB to kind of imply that this is Thunderbolt 4, which it is in terms of raw speed, just not in terms of all capabilities. Because Thunderbolt 4 requires output to multiple monitors. If I go to the tech specs of this individual product, though, and I look at the battery capacity specifically. So N1, Wi-Fi 7, so many bands. All the bands. I have the best bands. I'm so sorry. Face ID, charging, USB 4, USB 3. Display support 6K 60, 4K 120. Thunderbolt 4, 3 digital video output. iPad Pro 11 inches, so 31.29 and 13 inch at 38.99. If I'm not mistaken, these are the exact same capacities as on the M4, which means that the 11 inch actually has a little bit more battery capacity than the 11 inch version with the M2, while the 13 inch has a little bit less battery capacity than the 13 inch with M1. And M2 can actually M1 iPad Pro specs. Oh, I can, or let me first just look even at the M4. Change to English, technical specifications. Which one is that? No, that's the M5 version. Come on, Apple. I'm not sure if GSM Arena has those things like Apple M4, Apple iPad Pro specs, battery. Let's see. 31.29 for the 11-inch model, 38.99 for the 13-inch model. Yeah, these are the exact same batteries as we got before. If we look at the M2, that's 28.65, so a small increase for the 11-inch version, a small decrease for the 13-inch version, which again kind of brings up the question to me, why make the 13-inch version 5.1 millimeters? Like, clearly this device to me feels more like a 5.5 millimeter device that you made even thinner. And I mean, the 11-inch version did get thinner and better battery capacity, but the 11-inch version never had mini LEDs. So it has slightly different considerations when it comes to efficiency, battery power consumption, cooling. And now that the 11-inch and 13-inch are unified with their tandem OLED screens and overall design, I'm just... Why is the 13-inch version randomly a little bit thinner? Is it really just for bragging rights? Because why not give it the exact same battery capacity as the previous iPad Pros? I mean, you probably won't feel the difference because tandem OLED is so much more energy efficient than mini LED. But again, you could finally give us more than 9 hours of cellular browsing, which I hope you already do, given that now we are keeping the same screen, the same battery capacity, but we have a more efficient M5 chip and much more efficient C1X modem. So why is this still 9 hours? I couldn't tell you, to be honest. Let's look on the iPad Pro here still. So 50% faster, 30% less power usage. What's interesting, that should mean that I assume that means at 50% faster peak downloads or uploads, with 30% more efficiency, you basically get the exact same power consumption peak, but you just get a lot more storage from it, which ideally would mean that you could actually end the download or upload faster and in the end consume less energy overall. Cellular models of iPad Pro also allow users to enjoy GPS and location capabilities so they can navigate with even more confidence. Users can also enjoy 5G cellular support so they can stay connected for work or leisure all around the world. This is just words to fill this out. Of course, that's the capability. And with eSIM, users can quickly and securely add a new plan, blah, blah, blah. The new iPad Pro also features N1, a new Apple-designed wireless networking chip, Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, and Thread. N1 brings better performance when connected to 5 gigahertz networks. So I assume that means that it's just better antenna connection. They also bring up better overall performance and reliability for things like personal hotspot and AirDrop. So we'll have to see. Those are similar promises to what Apple made for the N1 on the iPhone 17 series. Now, better performance to 5G networks. 5 gigahertz networks should be noted that the main improvements of course, Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 is, of course, the 6 gigahertz network. And specifically with Wi-Fi 7, it's the ability to use 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz networks simultaneously. So this seemingly is not really happening here that much, or at least the usage of 160 megahertz of this 160 megahertz band is holding it back from being potentially 2 times faster as it most likely could be if they wanted to. But then there is the question, this is Apple's first generation modem. Who knows by what time it was actually finished? Right? I mean, think about it. The C1 wasn't that great, and just half a year later, Apple is out with the C1X. So maybe the N1 was already like ready for like a year. It just didn't have really products to go into, and maybe it needed more internal testing. That way, it might have not made it into the iPhone 16e, for example. So yeah, I'm overall happy, of course, to get Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, Thread, but specifically as somebody who always buys 5G iPads, I think that is honestly probably a hidden gem inside the iPad. Unrivaled design and display, so similar brightness characteristics to the MacBook Pro, 1000 nits of SDR, 1600 nits of HDR content. Should be noted that the iPad Pro is not quite as unique in that regard anymore as it was a year ago. Samsung's latest tablets do reach that, at least the most giant one as far as I know. I haven't yet seen tests for the smaller ones. And there has been a Lenovo laptop, like a yoga one. I don't remember which model. They have such confusing branding. 9i, I will guess. That one is getting a tandem OLED screen with actually very similar brightness promises, and these are not fake promises. They actually got a review by Notebook Check, and those numbers checked out. So pretty good to see more competition. Hopefully that means Apple will feel the pressure to next year add things. I don't expect them to actually change the screen, because this screen is probably almost endgame level. The only thing I would want from that screen would be slightly higher pixel density, to go from like 264 to like 326 or something like that would be pretty dope. It would be even crazy if it's like 400, so it would get like 50% more pixels on each axis. That would result in 4096 by 3072 pixels. That would be chef's kiss, endgame level display. Still offers a nano texture display option, still the same camera cutout as you can see here, or a camera bump to be more precise. You get one main camera, you get LiDAR and flash, of course microphone, and one dark hole to make it still look like a dual camera system. 120 hertz for internal and external usage, of course. And the usage of iPadOS 26. That, of course, is not surprising. I mean, Apple is advertising their new OS versions on everything, but also don't forget that the iPad got one of the biggest upgrades with its 26 version. Um, there's also an environmental promise here, bringing up Apple 2030 again. The new iPad Pro is made with 30% recycled content by weight, including 100% recycled aluminum in the enclosure, 100% recycled rare earth elements in all magnets, and 100% recycled cobalt in the battery. It is manufactured with 55% renewable electricity, like wind and solar, across the supply chain. So this is one thing that Apple really would want to up the numbers on. iPad Pro is also designed to last and offers industry-leading software support while meeting Apple's highest standards for energy efficiency and safe chemistry. that one, after seeing what Jerrick Everything did with the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, I wonder if Apple means safe chemistry for the environment or for not exploding in your hands if you fold it wrong. The paper packaging is 100% fiber-based and can be easily recycled. So apparently it's not yet recycled. Now, we did look into the pricing, of course, of the M4, of the M5 MacBook Pro. I apologize. If we look at pre-orders here, this is one thing where... For one, the $300 price difference between the different sizes feels a little bit much. Usually Apple charges $200. I mean, between the iPhone Pros, they only charge $100. Obviously, on the Apple Watch, they charge $50 difference. I understand this is an expensive screen, but $300 just takes some value away, in my opinion, from the 13-inch model. I don't even think that $1,000 is a terrible starting price, but I think that it should be $11.99 rather than $12.99. Colors, unfortunately, nothing fun here. And they do specifically now mention the amount of memory. And this is where I specifically, as somebody who does like to usually get higher end configurations, the one exception being my M1 iPad Pro, where I just got it with 256 gigabytes for some reason, but also for some reason that has been more than enough for me. I don't like this upgrade. Now, I obviously don't like the pricing here either, right? Apple's upgrades pricing from 256 to 512 is atrocious. But usually they charge you $200 to go from 512 to 1 terabyte. It's still why this is happening to me. Reconnection successful. Okay, my Wi-Fi seems to be working again. I guess that's the lesson here. Let me check the stream on my iPad, actually. Yeah, okay, so I apologize. The last few minutes, I'll label them as technical difficulties, so you know when to skip them, actually. If you're watching this as a VOD later on, sorry. This is not a technical issue that I've had for quite a while, and I think this is just a problem with my home internet connection. It's now completely stable, no frame drops, seems to also be running fast. My iPad is 5G and showing the stream quite well. As always, let me know what the audio and video quality is like for you, and let's actually get back. Now, I'm not sure how much you have missed. I'm not sure if the internal part will actually be uploaded. The part where the technical issues were, I'll just check out the stream later on so I can give you decent thumbnails. But yeah, I was complaining about the iPad Pro pricing. Obviously, as I said, the 13-inch version deserves to be $100 cheaper. And I think that the storage upgrades, for one, I do think it's time to make the iPad Pro start with 512 gigabytes. I just think it makes sense. People play games on the iPad, people work on their iPads, and if somebody wants to rely more on the internet and stuff like that, they can still pay Apple more money for something like a 5G upgrade, right? And then specifically, I mentioned the thing I like the least, which is, of course, the upgrade from the 512 gigabyte storage configuration to the 1 terabyte storage configuration, where Apple charges you $400, so $200 worth for the storage and $200 worth for the RAM. And I guess you also get one more CPU core. I guess that's kind of Apple's excuse. But don't forget, with the M4, you still got that same upgrade. And yes, the end product was similar, as you got 16 gigabytes of memory, but you came from an 8 gigs of RAM configuration. So while yes, in the end, this configuration is the same value as the M4 version before it, this one is better value than the base M4 versions before it. So why is this one the same? That makes it relative worse value. And yeah, then Apple's upgrade for the 2 terabytes is $400. That's standard. By their pricing, it's the same cost per gigabytes as when you upgrade from 512 gigabytes to 1 terabyte. But it's just not great. Because again, like nano texture glass. So you're paying still $200 for 5G. So this is one thing that is very much Apple. So they clearly are building now their own 5G modem, right? But instead of charging you less, because they now have more control over their 5G modem supply, they're giving you a better modem, especially with advantages in efficiency, which is Apple's biggest advantage over the rest of the industry in many ways. But they're giving you, but they're charging you still the same thing, which for them actually means that they have higher profit margins here. No engraving. Apple Pencil Pro, $130. No engraving. Yeah. Magic Keyboard, $350, or of course $400. Wait, no, that's sorry, that's 400 euros. I was briefly switching currencies. It's $300 for the 11-inch version. It's $350 for the 13-inch version. Again, these prices would be so much easier to swallow if there was like $100 less here, $100 less there. It just would feel like a more natural, especially even for some like well-earning people, right? Like a lot of people will buy an iPad just for like reading and stuff. So like, and they will still own like a Mac for a lot of their like main computer needs. So I think if Apple cut the cost here and there, they would just have a product that has a much better chance to exist in a household where there are also iPhones, where there are also Macs, and people would still say, you know what, I could save money, could buy an iPad Air, could lose out on tandem OLED on everything. But you know what? The pricing of the new tandem OLED iPad Pro is actually so good. The power of the M5 is so promising long term. I got a little bit more memory here. Ideally, you would have also had a little bit more memory there. But yeah, unfortunately, they still want to charge you a lot for RAM and storage. That's kind of what Apple likes to do. Also a little bit the same when it comes to 5G. I just find it interesting that the 5G modem costs double the price of the nano texture glass. I know the nano texture glass is just a coating on top. It's not a coating, it's a texture on top. But like some of these prices do not make all the sense in the world to me. While I understand this is probably more expensive to make, logistically, I would argue that there's probably more defined 5G demand for iPad than there is nano texture glass. But again, what do I know? Like, clearly Apple wouldn't be doing it this way if literally nobody was buying it. So maybe it's better than I think. But yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of this configuration here for the money. It should be at most $17.99. To be quite honest, at this point, it should be actually like $16.99. Like let's even say $17.99 because you do get a little bit more memory. You do get the unbinned chip, but that one extra CPU core really isn't changing much on the iPad Pro because like one thing that hasn't been mentioned here, for example, is like better cooling, like what you got on the iPhone 17 Pro versus the iPhone 16 Pro. They do not mention like a vapor chamber inside here or something like that. So very clearly the actual cost of making this device did not dramatically go up from one generation to the next. Now, I do understand why the pricing might not be that advantageous because we do have crazy instability when it comes to tariffs. Yes, Apple might still be escaping most of them, but you never know what happens tomorrow. And maybe instead of charging you now 90% of this price, but then after tariffs charging you 120% of this price. They just prefer to charge you 100% of this price right away, import as many iPads as possible into the US, so they're potentially ready for when or if tariffs hit, and Apple might not be able to escape them. But this is, again, a very different discussion, a more political discussion. Overall, I would argue the 512 gigabyte configuration is mostly good. Yes, am I happy about paying $200 for 256 gigs of storage, extra storage? No. But I do not think you will feel like the impact of one missing CPU core. And I do not think that most people need actually 1 terabyte, which is probably why Apple is willing to charge that much for it, because they think, oh, the people who actually do need that, like artists with a lot of files, or people who even edit videos on their iPads and stuff like that, oh, these people make money on that. They're willing to pay almost any price. While the regular schmoes, yes, they might not like paying more if you're like a gamer and maybe you want the extra storage for like your Resident Evil games and stuff like that, or maybe for the occasional like project you have for video editing or whatever, even just as a hobby or something like that. But you will pay it once, you'll kind of forget it over like the ownership of 5 years or something like that. Well, this is more like a business expense. At least I think that that's how Apple thinks about it. Or it's just a plus charge on like high-end enthusiasts, unfortunately. But there is one last product with the M5, and that one also getting some interesting details here. More changes than just a chip, but also not as many as I would have hoped in some way. Especially not enough changes, I would argue, when it comes to pricing. We can actually start with that, actually, Apple Vision. First, we can look at Apple tech specs. So micro LED, 7.5 micron pixel pitch, 92% of DCI-P3, so that's still a limit that we've had last gen, but we can now run it at up to 120 hertz. We have the M5. We still have the R1, so we did not get like a brand new R2 silicon, though given that the camera system and everything like that is still roughly the same, I don't think we actually need one. Now, we could use one that has more efficiency, or I assume that's one thing that Apple will improve down the line, which is even lower latency, but that's just not happening. The overall hardware here when it comes to camera and sensors, optics, audio, that's still very much the same as the Apple Vision Pro that ran with the M2 chip. And unfortunately, this is the biggest disappointment and kind of baffling to me. And this is something that has shown up before in actually the FCC files, I believe. So we do keep Bluetooth 5.3, but the real disappointment here is actually Wi-Fi, because now we are like on a decade-old tech at this point, and definitely like 5-year-old devices had Wi-Fi 6 already. Even like 4-year-old mid-range devices had Wi-Fi 6. Why exactly did this device not just get an N1 modem and was upgraded to Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 6? Is, however they build the motherboard, just not compatible with the N1 yet, and it would require a larger redesign? Maybe the M5 was just a drag and drop kind of upgrade with the M2, but then they had to keep everything else roughly the same? This is weird to me. This is still a pretty heavy device, but let's actually see how Apple is trying to advertise it. The main visual difference here, and you can see that it still retains all the features that might have not even been that well received, like wait, what was that called? It wasn't called Face ID. I forget what's that called? Like eyesight, right? It's a good name. I'm not gonna say it because it's it's very easy to remember once you see it, right? It might like go out of your memory, but it will quickly come back. But it gets the M5 chip, and more importantly, it gets the dual knit band that also is separately available for $100 now. And Apple also advertises it with visionOS 26 and the spatial apps and Apple immersive content that come with that. Of course, visionOS 26 is not exclusive to the Apple Vision Pro, neither is the immersive content. So, powerful M5 chips. Apple is advertising over 1 million apps and thousands of games on the App Store. Of course, not all of them are optimized for Apple Vision Pro. They are using iPad versions, most of it. So M5, dual knit band, and it's still the same experience, booking a demo, making sure the size fits. This new band should make it much better for weight distribution, and that's also why it works with the previous generation, because that's an issue that these two models share, both current and last gen. But it is what it is, right? It's not the biggest update. For some reason, Apple couldn't even be bothered to put in the N1 in this. Now, will you necessarily feel the difference between Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7 on such a product? I'm not sure. I've been constantly told that virtual reality devices need as low latency and therefore the highest possible speeds possible. So I'm a little bit surprised. I'm not sure if there are any health concerns from Apple in that regard by using like 6 gigahertz networking around your face. If that might be a limitation, but it is definitely a confusing one. I would like for them to comment on it, but I assume that that would be a scary thing to talk about. Even if you're saying, oh, we did not do it, well, then people will ask, well, what about 6 gigahertz networking if I put it in my pants? How is Apple advertising this? With the breakthrough performance of M5, the latest Apple Vision Pro delivers faster performance, sharper details throughout the system, and even more battery life, setting a new standard for what's possible in spatial computing. Paired with the comfortable dual knit band, innovative features in visionOS 26, and all new Apple immersive experiences spanning adventure, documentary, music, sports, spatial computing. I assume there's an end missing. Oh, no. Spatial computing is even more capable, entertaining, and magical with the new Vision Pro. Okay, 180 degree, 360 degree wide field of view from select. Okay, that's not the field of view in regards to the optical system here. Leap forward in performance with M5. Again, Apple once again confirms its third generation 3 nanometer, 10 core CPU, 10 core GPU. This is not a binge chip. Thankfully, I mean, this is a $3,500 product. R1 chip, 12 millisecond of real-time latency, basically. The high-performance battery now supports up to 2.5 hours of general use. So that should be, what, 25% more? I believe the last one was for 2 hours. That's 0.2. Testing conducted, internet browsing testing using 20 popular websites, tested with Wi-Fi. Okay, so tech specs, Apple Vision Pro M2. That's the new version. Come on, Apple. Come on, let me see the old one. 8-core CPU. Wait, what? Wait, is that all the same thing just from like Apple Vision Pro M2 battery life? I believe that one was rated for 2 hours. Up to 2 hours of general use and 2.5 hours of video playback. So that's half an hour more for each. So that's 2.5 hours now for general use and 3 hours of video playback. Thank you in that regard for Google Gemini. So that's, and again, that's the kind of AI that shouldn't be running offline on your device because it literally needs the data from the internet. So why make it offline, right? So I can actually now start closing stuff. Apple Vision Pro. Man, they really... Yeah, 10% more pixels on the custom micro OLED display compared to the previous generation, resulting in a sharper image with crisper text and more detailed visuals. So if I go here, I believe this is Apple's way to express pixel density on the screen here, which is 7.5 micron pixel pitch. Apple Vision Pro pixel pitch 7.5. Is that the current? Wait, is that the same as it was before? Both models feature the same 23 million pixel micro display. Wait, so then how do they improve pixel density then? Or am I missing here something? No, it's still 23 million pixels, 7.5 micrometers. Wait, how is it rendering 10% more pixels? Is it rendering them in software? Is it there like a little bit of super sampling going on? Or did the original run so sup its native resolution? Because I do get 120 hertz. Like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But like, how are they achieving 10% more pixels here? Also, like, disappointing. Still, like 720p AirPlay mirroring. Like, come on. Is that like limited by the Wi-Fi? This is a disappointing update, I would argue. It's still good that it's there over DM2. 16 gigs or more. I'm not sure they actually mentioned that here. I would assume it's probably the same 16 gigabytes as before. I think they would mention if they upgraded it to 24 gigabytes. Yeah, this one is really disappointing for $3,500. Like, I mean, don't forget, in the meantime, Apple is the one who doubled memory on M4 devices while making them actually cheaper than devices that came before it, right? Apple set the standard that we should expect more value by 100 gigabytes here, 100 gigabytes there, right? That's actually like a $300 price difference on the MacBook Air if you consider like more memory but a lower price point. So I'm a little bit confused why Apple couldn't reduce like the price here by at least $200, I would argue, plus 512 gigabyte standard, which would have resulted in like a $3,300 device, but with double the storage. That would have been like a 10% price reduction, roughly, because I mean, like around $400. That's just like, obviously, there's always more to give the customer when it comes to value, but I'm not asking for anything crazy. Like, this device especially, like, sure, might it be impacted by tariffs and everything? Yeah. Like, I'm not sure if the Apple Vision Pro is exempted, but this is silly. Like, I do not see the production costs of this being high enough to justify the cost. Like, the only reason I can see for it being this high is that Apple thinks that it's a super niche product, and that even if they reduce pricing by $500 or even by $1,000, it wouldn't actually result in meaningfully higher sales. So it just makes more sense to milk the higher end enthusiast customers to buy this. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. I mean, it does get a really, really large processor upgrade, right? From M2 to M5. This is so far beyond in terms of performance than like Project Muhan from Samsung. But this is still, like, come on, Apple. And I mean, they even bring up like 3,000 apps built for Vision OS. That's not too much. Like, you just mentioned a million, but that's from the iPad App Store. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like, this should have been like, if you wanted to keep the same pricing, honestly, in my opinion, you should have given us 24 gigs of RAM. You should have given us at least 512 gigs, but more likely the full 1 terabyte. And maybe something else, like, I don't know, like a new color. Like, Mark Gurman speculated that there was a space black color in the works for it. Seemingly not yet. So yeah, that one is a little bit iffy to me. Out of all the products, now the iPad Pro has a configuration upgrade pricing ladder that I don't like. But I love the iPad. I use the iPad Pro myself. From the M1 iPad Pro, I'm probably gonna upgrade by the time the M6 or the M7 iPad Pro is out. But Apple Vision Pro was not good enough yet to get me to buy it. This is not doing anything in that regard. Yes, if you were already interested, this is a better Apple Vision Pro, but it's not that much better, and it's not that much better value to reach a new audience than the original already did. But hey, when it comes to on-device processing power, it's absolutely unchallenged. This is in a class absolutely of its own. Don't forget, a lot of devices use chips that are less than half the speed of this, often like 1/3. And they don't actually have a coprocessor to handle all of this. In fact, this coprocessor actually has more memory bandwidth than the M5. So this is like 4 to 6 times faster probably than the vast majority of competitors. The fact that the external battery even runs it at up to 3 hours is honestly a little bit crazy. So there is still some very good engineering happening here. The other point of engineering is, of course, the new dual knit band delivers an even more comfortable fit for its users, according to Apple. Features the upper and lower straps that are 3D knitted as a single piece to create a new dual rib structure that provides cushioning, breathability, and stretch. The lower strap features flexible fabric ribs, so this is basically just like the original one, but it's doubled and then split in two, which of course makes sense. Apple previously had one that like allowed you to have like straps on top, but they weren't as comfortable as the original band for the back. But then the overall product was still more comfortable because it's just much more comfortable to have the way it comes from exactly the top. So yeah, this is a really good design. This is exactly what I thought Apple would do. I think that I'm not still a great fan of the visor, because the visor really eats into your field of view capabilities. But from what I tested, it is comfy, and Apple probably hasn't yet figured out the logistics to just replace it with something brand new. They have already all the testing infrastructure for it, so I'm not surprised that that one isn't changing, unfortunately. The intuitive dual function fit dial allows users to make fine-tuned adjustment to achieve their ideal fit. The new dual knit band comes in small, medium, and large sizes, is available to purchase separately, and is compatible with the previous generation of Apple Vision Pro. Customers can easily find the size that is right for them for using the Apple Store app for iPhone. And this is one thing that really differentiates Apple. It's not only like, yeah, they do have their own Apple stores and they do have their own apps, but the way they integrate all of that is really unique. Like, you literally can measure everything from like your iPhone, and I believe you can measure like using the 3D depth sensor to like get the exact size you need for like your the visor and everything. So meanwhile, Meta or Facebook just launched new Meta Ray-Bans, and you have to buy them mostly through like sunglass stores, which aren't tech stores, so they obviously cannot give you the same help. And then some tech stores might have them, but they might be literally like in the United States, they might be several states away from you. you have to be kind of lucky to have your size available. You cannot guarantee that up front that it will be available in the store. So for however many things Apple Vision Pro might be getting wrong, in my opinion, it's still the pinnacle of virtual reality. Now, yes, I understand the Meta Ray-Bans are not virtual reality. To be honest, they aren't even augmented reality in the traditional sense, because the screen does not react to what you're seeing. It just shows you stuff. Yeah, but obviously at $3,500, this better be unique. And to be honest, I really think it needs to be better than it is right now to either justify this high price point, or it should be better value by bringing what it's bringing right now, but at a lower price point. At least that's my opinion. Yeah, and then they're speaking mostly about content. Even the ability to connect PlayStation VR to Sense controllers. Still haven't seen much support for that, but that's probably starting now. I mean, I shouldn't be forgetting that iOS 26 and all of that isn't even that new. And they make similar environmental commitments here as we've already seen on like the iPad and MacBook Pro. Yeah, but that's about it for today. I mean, those were 3 new products that I went through in roughly 2 hours. We had some technical issues, but I appreciate everyone who stuck with us. Guys, whenever you join me, please consider doing the YouTube jazz, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. You can become a channel member here on YouTube. You can become a supporter over on Patreon. Of course, just comment. I love interacting with you guys. Probably wasn't the best time for a stream, and especially after a longer hiatus. So I know the live chat wasn't super vibrant as it can be often, but I still thank everyone who joining. Benveni is saying the one thing that I completely disagree with, saying all I care is Siri getting smart, which kind of sounds like you're more investor thinking than regular people thinking. But hey, to each their own priorities. I personally do not care about it. I use AIs these days a little bit more, but honestly, the way I interact with like ChatGPT, it's really me like forcing it to analyze like scientific papers and historical books. And most of it is based on stuff that I have read myself. So I'm using it to kind of test myself, and I'm using my own knowledge to test AI. None of that could currently run on device, especially not in the way like that's convenient. Like I wouldn't download the paper, then throw it into Siri, make it analyze it, and then make it ask questions about it. That's, for one, that's a lot of compute. That's also a lot more effort. It makes way more sense for me to say to ChatGPT, go to that link and analyze this paper according to that question. And even ChatGPT 5 thinking, right, will take like 2 minutes to think about many of these things. And ChatGPT 5 non-thinking is completely worthless for what I'm asking. So given that ChatGPT 5 thinking needs more intense resources and more time, I just don't think that that will be on device in the next 20 or 30 years. So, I mean, there will be some of that, but just not enough. I mean, Samsung recently came out supposedly with a model that reduces like computational load by like 20x. But that's in a very specific scenario, so we'll have to see how that actually benefits AI going forward. Benveni, I mean, I bought my 16 most because I didn't want to be let out. Yeah, but you still got the 16 Pro Max, right? Like, I mean, I understand what you mean. We usually associate Apple with like higher trust than Meta, Google, Microsoft. And with AI, we kind of thought it would be happening at least on the schedule that Apple promised. We didn't necessarily expect it would be instantly as good as all the other AIs, but at least for on-device stuff, we thought, oh, it would bring some unique advantages because of that. I understand why that got your juices going. I mean, I didn't upgrade to the 16 Pro Max, for one, because I already had the 15 Pro Max that was Apple Intelligence ready, and because Apple Intelligence also promised to be come much later to the European Union, unfortunately. So I kind of was fucked either way, right? Or I was lucky either way with the 17 Pro, with the 15 Pro, but I was fucked because of me living in Germany and not getting it early on, regardless of how good it might be. So yeah, I understand it, and I do want Siri to get better. It's just you said all I care is Siri getting smart, and that's what I disagree with. I still prefer Apple focusing on hardware and software in terms of like the operating system, first party apps, third party development tools. I still put all of that at like number 1, 2, 3, 4. And then like in place 7, 8, 9, this is where I would put AI. There are computational or machine learning features that I do put on like place 5 or 6. But that is stuff that Apple has done for years. Things like computational photography and even individual Apple Intelligence features like cleanup, not really writing tools themselves, but stuff like grammar checking and word suggestion, offline voice recognition or dictating. So yeah, it's not that I think AI is worthless. I just prefer the smaller AI stuff, and then I prefer the really large AI stuff. And that middle road where Apple is currently failing, so to speak, that one is the least important to me. And I'm not saying that, it's going to become the most important thing to me once Apple nails it. Like, no, I do want some of those things to get better. Mainly, I want visual intelligence to get better for stuff that's happening on device. I don't want to have to go through Google. I don't want to have to circle everything that I want to find because it just takes more space. I want the computational power. The moment I take a screenshot, it analyzes the text on the page and stuff like that. But I'm not even sure if that would just not require so much more power and battery life that even if it could run on device and Apple really had a really great AI model, I'm not sure if I actually would end up using it if it had negative repercussions on how hot my device gets, how short the battery might be in the end. Yeah, but again, this will be a topic for a different day, and I did promise right in the beginning of the stream that I will be reacting to things like, obviously, iOS 26, iPadOS 26, whenever the new Siri launches. You can all expect that coverage in the future. Benveni, I mean, I get why they delayed this feature, but what takes them to delay even more? Well, we'll have to see. For now, it seems like they're somewhat confident in it launching in the first half of next year. We'll have to see, well, at least to Mark Gurman reporting. Don't forget, they only promised 2026. They did not promise March or April. Also, don't forget, they did lose a lot of their AI engineers, so we'll have to see how that impacts their plans. We'll also have to see how the rollout for their private cloud compute infrastructure is going. So, yeah, there's a lot to still think about. I was thinking of Google Clue would be more useful for me. Like how many times would want to ask Siri to says the flight details or save something to someone contact? Sorry, bro, you have to put it in. I was thinking if Google Clue would be more useful. I don't think you don't mean Google Clue. You mean like that latest thing for the Pixel devices, right? That's automatically suggesting thing. Would be more useful for me. How many times would want to ask you? Wait, are you for real? Do you think that feature is actually like useful in everyday life? Because what I've seen from every reviewer is that the idea is neat of what Google has implemented, but it's not good enough, even with Google's supposedly better AI. Plus, again, like how often do you actually do that? Like how often do you need to send exact flight details to somebody or something like that? And how much extra time would it really cost you for that one time you need that in like a month or 2 or 3 months to instead just go to your own email, maybe even just remember the flight number and everything yourself and just send them the flight number, which, by the way, I actually have seen Google getting wrong on the Pixel devices. But again, this is a very different discussion. You distracted me a little bit here in the end. Thank you anyway for joining. I apologize that you obviously joined much later on, couldn't check out the entire content. Maybe you guys can check it out as a VOD afterwards. I do have to end it because my eyes are just completely killing me at this point, and I do have some to eat something at this point. So thank you anyone who still joined. Thank you to anyone who will join. Before I leave, last shout out for you guys to do the YouTube jazz, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. Of course, if you want to support me here directly and you catch me live, leave a super chat or super sticker. Consider becoming a channel member or a supporter over on Patreon. The link for the latter is in the description of the channel. Thank you guys so much. I hope I'll find you maybe by the end of next week, or maybe early like the week after. So next week is really busy for me, as is this weekend. So I'm really glad Apple actually announced all of those devices on the same day, so I could go through them one by one. And who knows, maybe tomorrow they will announce HomePod Mini and Apple TV, and I might be able to put in another stream late evening tomorrow, but I'll let you know. For that, by the way, go to my Discord. That's the best place. That's where even when I'm like on the train or something, I'll briefly check it out, share some new info. So that's the last YouTube Jazz thing, which is not a YouTube thing, is please go to my Discord. You'll find the link to that also in the description of this channel. But that's about it for today. For the Rileys in the chat, I'm going full screen. You're getting big mark before I leave you. I apologize for the technical issues today, but thankfully they were not my fault and not the fault of my microphone. They were the fault of my internet, which I cannot fully control. So I hope I'll be back with just a lot more like to talk about reviews, benchmarks, side-by-side comparisons, right? So even though the next hiatus might be pretty long, probably like 10, 12 days, I hope it will be worth it. And I hope you'll tune in then. Thank you guys so much. I'll catch you next time. Let me know what else you would like to see me cover next. And I'll see you then. This is MarkTech, tuning out.